And now it's going up. And hey, everybody, welcome to the Sustainiacs. I'm Michael Vincent. I'm the Sustainiac every time you turn this on. And then I have new Sustainiacs. Well, not new. I suspect this guy's been a Sustainiac his whole life. Maybe he just realized it. I don't know. But it's Joseph Klatt. And I'm really happy to know you. We were introduced by a mutual friend, said, hey, this guy might be kind of interesting. And I agree 100%. I think everybody out there is going to think so as well. Welcome to the show, Joseph. I think you're freaking awesome, dude. What's going on, man?
Thanks for having me on, Michael. Yeah, not too much. Just excited for the day.
You just turned on your computer and boom, I was there going, hey, dude, you want to talk?
Exactly.
Is that what happened? That's fantastic. So, dude, you're heavily into recycling plastics, right? And as I am as well. And that's how we got introduced, right? I mean, we have similar ambitions in slightly different ways, both talking about micro recycling, et cetera. You get into it in a bit more micro way than I do. And I've run into people say, hey, we got a micro recycling plant. It's like 20,000 square foot building with these huge machines. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's not micro. And then I'm doing mine. And then I'm like, well, listen, I'm not micro either. And you're doing some really cool things. Marble plastics is what it's called, right? So tell us about that real quick, Joseph. What is that? Why should people be interested in that? And then let's get into your history and how you came to be there.
Sounds great. Yeah. So Marble Plastics is my main project at the moment. And it's based in the US, in Ohio. And what we do is that we compression mold plastic waste into 4x8 sheets of material. And that material can then be cut into countertops, furniture, and wall coverings. And the cool thing about this material is, number one, it utilizes plastic waste as a building material. But the other thing is that because it's recycled material, we really try to highlight that. And we do that by separating the material by colors and then really utilizing the colors in our patterns so that for the end user, the one who's sitting at the table or looking at the wall, they can tell that it's recycled. And the reason for that is that we want to involve people in the fact that recycling is real and it can be done. There's so much disinformation and misinformation about recycling and recycling plastic in particular. So our product really helps us get the point across that, plastic can be recycled. This is what it looks like. It can be beautiful and it can be high quality. It can be a really aesthetic material as well.
Yeah. And that's part of the problem there when you've touched on, and people haven't tried to like evangelize plastics or recycling plastics or tried to do what you're doing and what I'm doing is create recycling actual operations and get people involved and moving plastics from the consumers throwing it away to manufacturing don't understand all the difficulties that are there. And everything you just said is there's so much to unpack. And what you just unpacked, that what you just said is unbelievable. From you're actually making stuff that shows that it was recycled, and that's how I got into this. Actually, making ocean bound plastic and ocean plastic into guitar picks and pick guards, et cetera, and that type of stuff. And they were intended to look that way. Part of the problem with recycling plastics is that nobody wants a water bottle that looks like it was recycled, right? And nobody wants a makeup case that looks like it was recycled or, whatever it happens to be, right? They want it orange. They don't want it black or gray or brown or speckled with all the different colors or that type of stuff. And that's why one of the things I loved about what you're doing is the products that you guys are making out of there obviously says, I've been recycled and look how freaking cool this is, and going after that market. Cause that's part of the problem, right? Is people want packaging and they want, and I'm not talking about the shrink wrap around a piece of fruit or anything like that. I'm talking about the packaging of lipstick, or when your cell phone cover, or even your remote controls or anything like that. They want orange, or they want this, or they want that. They want them to look sexy. And you're changing the look of that, right? What does that shiny thing look like? Well, that's obviously recycled. That's the shiny thing I want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially with, over the last 10 years, I'd say especially the last five, awareness around the plastic problem has grown, tremendously. And
Sure.
I think that's kind of really peaked or, really grew a lot around awareness of the amount of plastic in the ocean, especially the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. That really caught the attention of society, and it really highlighted the fact that we have to do something about this. And so that got people going, and you know immediately what people think of first is, okay, how do we recycle this material so it doesn't end up in the ocean? And so by turning this into a useful product that people can see and recognize the fact that it is recycled, it helps connect them to that issue and see that something can be done about this. And I won't say that recycling is the only solution for the plastic problem. We need really a myriad of solutions to go at this very difficult problem. But it is
Mm.
one of the solutions, and that's what we focus on. We focus on the recycling of the material into a useful product that can connect people to the idea of, hey, this material can be recycled, and it's useful and beautiful.
Mm. 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 I love it, and you guys are all over the place, right? I mean, is well, let's talk about how you got to Marvel, right? So, as you went to Indiana, right? You went to IU, so
Hmm.
you're a Hoosier, whether you like it or not. You probably do. I don't know if you're from Indiana or not, but Indiana, obviously, a lot of famous people have gone to Indiana. But did you go there and study environmental sciences, et cetera, or how did you get into looking at plastics one, but just environmental sciences and looking at that as something as a career choice? When did that occur?
Yeah, it was during my time in Indiana, and when I got to college, when I got into school, my mind was just sort of opened up to all the different societal problems, and I really latched onto the idea of sustainability and how can we turn around the direction of society in terms of environmental problems. And at that time, the thing that really interested me about waste was I felt like it was really kind of the missing link of how do we create a more sustainable society.
Mm,
And I also had a little bit of a family connection as well, because my grandfather, he owned a waste company in the 80s. So he was hauling garbage in Dayton, Ohio, relatively small town. And so I
mm,
kind of had garbage in my family. It was a big part of my mom's
yeah,
growing up and just family business. So I had always waste kind of in the back of my mind. And so then when I got into school, got into environmental issues, yeah, waste is really what I focused on. And my first job in college was I worked for a guy who had a small business where he was picking up recyclables from businesses in Bloomington, Indiana, where I went to school. He was picking them up with a bicycle and a bike trailer. So he hired me to be basically the pickup man. So I would get up early in the morning, put on a jumpsuit, and then ride my bike around to different businesses and pick up recyclables.
so did you liken yourself to Breaking Away, the movie Breaking Away, where the bicyclists and all
Exactly.
that?
It's a
Cutters.
perfect connection to Indiana.
Yeah,
Um, and I had a blast doing that. I loved like getting my hands on the material, seeing what people were, trying to recycle, and then seeing the process of where that material went. We would take it to a place where they had a bunch of roll off dumpsters. We would load
yeah,
the materials into the respective commodity bins. Then that would go to a material recovery facility, and then eventually to a recycling plant. Would actually, be compacted or shredded down into smaller form, and then go to a manufacturer to be made into a new product. So
right.
at that time, I really just learned the whole process of what was happening, and I just got jazzed about it. I just thought it was so cool. Loved getting on my bike and doing that. So that was really my foyer into recycling and waste.
Gotcha. And so, what were your takeaways from that? I mean, it's very very cool. But what you're doing now is you're doing micro recycling, right? And you're taking plastics that are at that first point, right? So you're on your bike and you're showing up and you're getting the plastics and you're turning it into a product right there,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's like none of those other steps that you just went through happen. I mean, they can, and then go into producing one of your, but you're reducing that entire cycle and process and logistics infrastructure down to one point. Was that the ultimate goal to get there?
Well, yeah, I think at that time when I was just getting into waste, I started to learn about how transportation is a huge factor in waste in recycling. So how traditionally there's just a very long supply chain to get it from the point of the person generating the waste all the way into a new product. There's many steps, starting with the collection, the sorting, the processing, the shredding, the compacting, the remanufacturing, and that's just makes recycling economically difficult. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of hands touching that. There's a lot of labor. There's a lot of transportation. There's a lot of energy, and that makes recycling, depending on the commodity, expensive.
What you described in what you're doing now at Marble Plastics is you've reduced everything into this one step. So basically, you could be rolling up in your bike like you did in Bloomington with a machine on the back, and you're making products right out of that plastic that is being thrown away immediately. I mean, you got to clean it a little bit and shred it, right? But all that stuff is happening as you do and what I do on a micro scale so that it's condensed. Can you talk about that? Were you trying to get there, or did you just kind of stumble on this? Because that is a significant reduction in infrastructure and cost savings, right?
Yeah. So when I was doing that job with the bicycle and trailer, I really learned about how the economics of recycling is directly related to transportation.
Yeah.
The length of the supply chain. And traditionally in large scale recycling, there's a lot of steps that start with collection, sorting, processing, cleaning, shredding, remanufacturing, and that's a very long supply chain, which makes the economics sometimes, depending on the commodity, very could be cost prohibitive.
Right.
So
Challenging at best, right? In some
yes,
place.
yes. So ideally, in an ideal case, you can take the material and then turn it into a new product, kind of as locally and quickly as possible to be able to reduce the overall transportation. That helps with the economics, but it also helps in an environmental sense because there's less energy. You're moving materials around less. So that is what we are trying to do with Marble Plastics: is remanufacture and recycle as locally as possible. Number one, from an economic sense, trying to reduce the cost, but also from a connection standpoint, trying to connect people with the fact that the material that they put in their bin or take to us can be turned into a new product locally, and it's a new product that they can actually see, and they can know
Hmm.
the people that actually do it. Because of the fact that many people don't believe in recycling, because they're not connected to it. It's too abstracted from them. They don't know where that material is that they're putting in their bin goes. So they don't believe the fact that it really gets turned into a new product.
Well, and they see a lot of statistics that can be very misleading, and a lot of them are true, right? But I mean, you see things like the U.S. went from 9% down to 6% recycling,
Mhm.
et cetera, and those type of. So there's that mistrust as well, right?
Right. And a lot of it is true because of the complexity of the supply chain. It's hard to know, number one, where the material goes exactly. A
Sure.
lot of times it does get thrown out for contamination issues or some other operational issue. Um, but the more that they can see the fact that it's recycled locally, helps build trust in the system, and then helps ideally bring up that recycling rate, because the more people believe in it, the more they're going to want to give their materials to this system, which can turn it into a new product.
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100% because it's that transparency of what is actually going on, but understanding what those issues are. Um, and you can educate, et cetera. But it seems to me what you're doing is is trying to enable people to do it, right? Or giving them the access to recycling. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is giving expanding the access, because there's parts of the recycling supply chain that are serviced well by the existing system. The problem is that it's difficult to do every commodity all in that same type of large scale um, system, because some commodities, some plastic types in particular, there's not enough volume, there's not enough amount of that material out in the system to make it worth it for the large scale systems to handle.
Mm,
So
yeah.
we actually focus on a type of polymer, which is polystyrene. It's the number 6, if you see that recycling symbol.
Yep.
Um, and that's a material that is very rarely, almost never recycled in a residential or commercial traditional stream. And,
100%
and
true.
and the reason for that is there's not that much of it in those streams to make it worth it for the recyclers to pick it out of the stream and then turn it into a new product. And so what we do is we because it's a smaller scale operation, we have a 6,000 square foot facility. It's not huge, and we're able to process smaller volumes of material that a traditional recycler would not service.
Yeah. No, that makes 100% sense because, and that's what it is, and that's the purpose behind around micro recycling. That's what we do as well. It is that going to those locations where it's not an economically viable business model for the big dogs, so to speak, to come in and do anything. Right? There's plenty of communities out there across the United States that really don't have access to recycling. And if they do, it's what you described. It's all single stream. Everything's thrown into one thing. It's transported 50, 100, 200 miles to a place where then they only extract that which is the easiest to extract because of the economics. You've already destroyed the economics by driving it 200 miles, right?
Right.
So they're not going to go in there and pick out, a half a ton of polystyrene when they're going to get, 5 or 6 tons of plastic bottles very, very easily. And
Exactly.
also, you've got a system, where you've got the MRFs, as the material reclamation facilities are run traditionally by those who have been recycling for years and years and years and years and years. And that those are now when you get into that, you're talking about pulp, you're talking about paper, you're talking about corrugated, the inside part of the that's been recycled forever.
Hmm.
Right. And so that has been the mine, so to speak, for them. And so they're not plastic companies that are recycling these in many instances. And
That's
so it's
right.
a secondary product for them. And that also leads to the economic challenges of recycling.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely. And I think plastics poses a unique challenge as well, because people think, okay, I've got glass, paper, metal, and then plastic. But plastics are, incredibly diverse in
Mm,
their chemical composition. And
yeah.
really, two plastic types are almost as different as glass to paper as they are similar to one another.
Well,
So,
Joe, do you go by Joseph or Joe?
Joseph.
Joseph. So, Joseph, just in your space, you're in the PS number 6 polystyrene space.
Hmm.
Okay. I was about to ask you just polystyrene or expanded polystyrene?
Yeah,
Right. So,
um,
just in your space, you have to
that's true.
right?
That's true. Even within the polystyrene, there's, because there's expanded polystyrene like styrofoam, which most people are very familiar with,
Yeah.
versus rigid polystyrene, which is like a CD case, that clear cover, or
Right.
a plastic hanger. And
Or
those
fork.
are,
A lot of
or fork,
cutlery is
or
PS, right?
exactly. Plastic utensils often are PS.
Yeah.
No, not always.
Not always. Sometimes they're PP.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that's a perfect example of how plastics are just hard because they're very diverse. Even within the same type, there's a lot of diversity. So at our facility, we can recycle something like expanded polystyrene, like styrofoam,
Hmm. Oh, so
because
you do. You do
uh,
the
we
EPS as
don't
well?
we don't do a lot of it. And the reason for that is, even though it is basically the same chemical composition as a plastic utensil,
Yeah.
but it has air in it. That's why it's
Yes.
so light and fluffy. So if the air is taken out, we can use it because it basically brings it back to that same form as the plastic utensil. But that requires a couple of steps,
Gotcha.
densification or compaction, to bring it down to the more pure form, getting that air out. So we don't do that because we don't have access to that material after it's been taken the air
I
out of it.
got you.
Although I would like
Gotcha.
to get into that because I think it's another huge problem in the whole plastic world is
No, it really is. It really
also
is, and people don't understand just that it can be because that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, doesn't it, Joseph? Where you when you're people think, oh, well, you can't recycle that. Well, no, that's not true. That's. I mean, we can argue that I'm arguing semantics all day long, but I'm not. I'm arguing pure, just straight up logic. It's all recyclable. We just don't recycle it.
right.
So the rhetoric saying, well, that's not recyclable, kind of gives people this sense that, well, I can't do anything about it anyways because it's not recyclable. No, that's complete garbage. It's 100% recyclable. All of it is. Even
Yeah,
the PVC pipes that they say don't recycle this, it's not recyclable. Baloney. It 100% is recyclable. They just don't have the infrastructure to do it. I think if we had that mindset, if everybody had that mindset, there'd be a lot more people like you and I out there trying to solve some issues, right?
absolutely. Yeah. And it's also understandable, I think, from most people's perspective because it's complex. Like when someone asks me, like, is this thing recyclable? And I'm like, well, technically, yes, practically, no,
Yeah.
because of the economics and the collection infrastructure and all these complex issues. So, and most people just don't have the time and brain space to like really understand exactly all the different commodities and what can be done with each one.
Right.
So, I also understand from their perspective why they don't get into it because
Oh
it's
yeah, sure.
complex.
No, I get it. I get it totally. I think that, but I think there's also a responsibility to say, wait a minute, we can do that. We just need to figure out how to do it, and that
Yeah,
would
that's right. And I
maybe
think
inspire somebody to try and make it happen, like you're doing with PS.
yeah. And that is where I think entrepreneurship and business innovation can be a huge asset because, like you said, these can be recycled from a technical standpoint. They just need the business and logistical and operational infrastructure to make that happen.
Yeah, and part of it, I mean, you're going around part of the issue, or you're solving for part of the issue for recycling, even a single. And I want to say single stream, but most people who understand logistics think or recycling think single stream. I mean, like this group of all different types of plastics. I mean, a single RIC or single RIC code, resin identification code, right? You're just doing PS. But even within it, like we talked about, you have ES, you have expanded polystyrene, EPS. But you also have all these different colors. Clear, you got natural, you got black, you got white, you got yellow, you got orange, you got gold, you got all these different things, right? And then you've got different additives to the different plastics so that they can be used for different things. Like that's why when you buy something, it says do not microwave. Or sometimes the plastics is microwavable, like in a
Hmm.
TV dinner type of thing, right? You can microwave it, right? Those are the same plastics with different additives inside them. And that changes the ability to use them on the recycling side because those additives change the performance or quality of the the product that's being made from them that have that recycled content, right? And so that's a huge issue as well.
Huge.
And so how do you solve for that? I mean, I know Procter and Gamble and Pure Cycle are out there redoing PP, and they're basically chemical washing it. They're not. It's not chemical recycling really, but they're bringing it down to those pure polypropylene polymers and removing all those additives, et cetera. So basically, in a sense, they're producing virgin plastic out
Yeah.
of used plastic, right?
Hmm.
Huge cost. They're developing it, applaud their efforts. Hopefully, it becomes economically viable. They're dumping a lot of money in it and they're being very, very successful. You're saying we can also go away from that and create functional. To me, I want to say that you make functional recycled artwork.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how you you do it, right? But that seems to be what you're doing there, right?
Yeah. And part of our process is that it's a relatively simple method. So we use heat and pressure. So we take the shredded plastic waste, we lay it into a mold, and then we use heat and pressure to compress that into a sheet form. And in a way, it's kind of a rudimentary way to process the material. And it enables us to take a more variety of polymers coming in. So even though, like you said, there's different additives with polystyrene or any plastic, When you have a more sort of rough method, you can take more
Yeah.
variability in the chemical composition. And we can do that because we are a smaller scale, and because of the production method we're using. Now, a traditional manufacturer that has to really, dial down, extremely engineered the type of material that you're using and the machines that they're using, they need a process that uses something like almost close to a virgin material, like you mentioned with Pure Cycle,
Yeah, if
where
they're going to get to an FDA letter of non-objection type of pellet to be, which means they can use it for food, and there's different levels there, like we were talking about, right? There's
Mhm.
different levels of FDA. There's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There may be a couple more, but one says it can be used for freezing, one not, one's just for cooling, one's for everything, all that kind of stuff, right? Just can't randomly throw plastic in. But
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah, I wanted to just bring that point up because you touched on it a second there.
So yeah, I mean, again, it kind of depends on what you're doing, for how big of a problem that is with the chemical variability. And it goes back to the point that we need kind of a variety of different solutions for this very complex problem. We need
Yeah,
those manufacturers working on, chemical, highly engineered recycling. We need people like us doing a more rudimentary form, that can use that variability and actually highlight it. Um, and we need ultimately we need a general reduction in the amount of plastics that we're putting out into,
100%.
um, the economy, because you know, no matter how much engineering design you put into some of this stuff, the economics are just difficult. So that makes the problem just somewhat unsolvable for some plastics and some commodities. So we need to greatly also expand the amount of reduction, the amount of plastics that we're using, and increase the amount of other solutions like bioplastics, compostable plastics
Right.
that can replace some of this plastic that just is not going to have an economic business solution for it, no matter what.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we need to focus on that as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where it comes into these difficulties with dealing with the nascent technologies and actually long term technologies, et cetera, that don't quite get 100% there. Right? They're not the cleanest, but they're cleaner, and
Hmm.
there's steps forward that have to be done. Right? I mean, you're very intelligent person, obviously, and marble plastics is not going to solve the plastics waste problem. It's just not. It's going to solve part of it, which is what we need, right? And what I guess what I'm getting to is we don't have to get 100% of the way there with each one of our solutions, but together we can make huge impacts if we're tackling little parts of it as we go along. Because what you alluded to is the genie's out of the bottle, and that happened back in the 50s when you can look at Life magazine. Let's research the covers where it says the new throwaway society, where they're promoting and teaching us, hey, just use plastic, just throw it away. You don't even have to clean up after a dinner party,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it was all over covers of stuff like it's the new throwaway society. That's what they're promoting it as, right? And now that genie is out of the bottle, we're never going to put it all the way back in.
Hmm.
But we can hopefully start to manage it in a way that is a lot more responsible. 'Cause that's always been my argument. I don't know how you feel, and I'll ask you how you feel about this statement. Plastics aren't the issue; it's our irresponsible use of
Absolutely.
them. That's
Absolutely.
the issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think but plastic is a sort of amazing material. It's
It really
amazing
is.
what you can do with plastics. Yeah, it's just kind of a material misused and misplaced. It's overused
Yeah,
for things that it shouldn't be used for, in my opinion. Um, and the biggest one is single use plastics. I mean,
yeah,
it's a material that will literally last for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that you use in some applications for 30 seconds. And that's just a misplaced material, where, objects or products that you want to last hundreds of years, that's where it makes sense, because it's a match between the material and the use case. So,
yeah,
and even within the single use space, I think, there's things like plastic water bottles, which kind of work in the economics of that and the operations can work, but there's lots of other single use applications which don't work. So again, it's a complex issue, but and we have to understand that there's has to be a variety of solutions for that complex issue. And
Yeah.
one sort of metaphor I would make is that people might understand is with climate change. So people understand that climate change is a very big issue. It's a complex problem. There's no one solution. It's not just solar that's going to make us, solve climate change. There's mitigation. There's adaptation. There's a variety of different technologies, and those together will help us achieve that. Help us solve climate change. It's a similar thing with plastics, where we have to have a reduction, innovation, recycling. It's all those together which are going to help us get there.
Yeah, 100%. And you touch on climate change, and one of the things is that people tend to separate climate change from like recycling, and I don't think there's enough education out there to really evangelize the fact that recycling reduces climate change. It helps with climate change. It reduces. I mean, recycling plastics is in many plastics. I think the average is like 64% less carbon emissions utilizing recycled plastics over virgin plastics. And
Mhm.
some of them are as high as 77%. It depends on the type of plastic because they have different processes, et cetera, right? But recycled plastics, by and large, is greater than 60% less GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions. It's a massive industry, billions upon billions of tons being produced, and the emissions from it are huge as well. Um, and so why the separation? I mean, there needs to be this connection that X amount of recycling equals X amount of carbon that is not going back into the just because the process of recycling doesn't directly get rid of the GHG, it prevents new virgin materials from producing GHG, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that an important point?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's directly connected, and I think, yeah, there's those direct, like, numerical comparisons that you can show the fact that it's less energy intensive to use a recycled material versus a virgin material. But
I'll
the other
give you
part of
one. I'll give you one. I'll give you one here, right here, because this is interesting. This is a project I'm working on. Shrink wrap, pallet shrink wrap, right?
Mhm.
The clear plastic. Sometimes it's black, which is ridiculous. They use black pallet shrink wrap to wrap it around the valuable freight, so that nobody knows it's valuable.
Mm.
Which is hysterical to me, right? Where's the good stuff? See the
Yeah.
black pallet over there? That's the good stuff. It's
Now I
so
know. Now I
dumb.
know where to look.
Yeah, exactly. It's the stupidest thing ever. But anyways, 1 pound of that stuff, right? If you recycle 1 pound of it, it equals 8 miles of a class 8 truck driving down the road in greenhouse gas emission reduction. One
Wow.
pound. That's it. It's pretty staggering, right?
Yeah, it
When
is.
you think about it.
It is. And I think it gets the point across. I think it gets the point across of we need to just think more circular and less linear. So, okay, 66% or 70% reduction is amazing, but it also gets the point across that we're not using a new material. We're not extracting any more material to make some new shrink wrap for a pallet,
Right.
and that helps. So plastic recycling, but also food waste recycling. Just the fact that we can transition into an economy where we are reusing materials, and that's ultimately what we need to do with all commodities, um, which are going to have varying levels of energy efficiency in the recycling process. But the important thing is that we need to reuse materials. As simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. It is as simple as that. Now, I want to get into a little bit of. You sent me a video, dude. And is there a link online for to
Yeah.
Oh, there is. Okay, good. So you got to give me that link so I can put it in down below. People go down below and you can hit this link. All right, so you can see this. But it is you and colleagues, right? You're in Africa. You're in Nigeria,
Hmm.
right? And so you guys went there to set up micro recycling, right? How
That's
was
right.
that experience?
Yeah, so the reason that I got into plastics and micro recycling is that I went to the Netherlands to help with a project called Precious Plastic, which is a open source micro recycling community which is all about developing small scale machines to recycle plastic waste into new products locally.
Oh,
And it's a
cool.
super cool project. It was started by a Dutch designer named Dave Hackens, actually for his graduation project for design school. He saw the plastic waste problem and he was like, okay, I'm going to design some small scale machines that put the power in people's hands to recycle plastic waste into a new product, which
Gotcha.
before was really kind of just in the hands of big companies, big governments, where the
Yeah.
small entrepreneur didn't have as much access to small scale machines. So I went to the Netherlands and we were in a warehouse designing a bunch of different machines and products that you could make from the machines that we were designing. And then we went out into the world and we partnered with other organizations to install some of these machines and just see how they work in real life applications. So that's why I was in Nigeria, in Lagos, which is it's kind of like the New York of Africa. It's a crazy place, tons of people, tons of waste, and we partnered with an entrepreneur there who wanted to actually do a similar product, which I'm doing here in the States, making a sheet material for a building material.
Mm.
And so we went there and we set up a small facility for him to start recycling plastic waste into this building material. A bunch of challenges, getting all the electrical and the waste stream all set up. And that's where you really learn on the ground. That's where you really see what recycling looks like in most of the world,
Yeah.
which is kind of completely different than the westernized big machinery environments.
What's
So
more hands-on, right? It's more of a reality day to day is what I find.
absolutely, and it's because it's kind of a more chaotic environment. There's also more opportunity for just doing it. Where
Yeah.
in a lot of industrialized economies, there's a lot of regulation around what you can do, what waste you can touch, how you transport that. When you're in the developing world, there it's a little bit more of a Wild West scenario.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, and there's good and bad about that. But one of the good is that you can innovate more quickly, and you can get your hands on the material, and you can start playing around, making new products, seeing what works, what doesn't, and that's what we were doing.
Yeah, and one of the bad is we had a machine in South Africa where they set up one of our machines and they just went up and scaled up the pole and tapped into the power line.
Oh, yep. That happens. Yeah, not surprised.
because there, because there isn't anybody to call to say, "Hey, can you run a line down to here?" No, it doesn't, there's nobody
Yep.
to do that. Just get up there, get yourself some copper, and make it happen.
Hmm.
Nobody will know. Nobody cares. Just do it. It's crazy, but yeah, that experience. To me, it's really interesting that a lot of the innovation and the testing comes from there. And like you said, it's more of an environment that lends itself to just do it, right? But there's also it lends it's the environment that is the global South really has been our trash can, in many ways,
Yeah.
and in many ways they brought it on. Well, we've abused it, but they've also accepted the responsibility and had the ability to get these things done right
Hmm.
by just because, like you said, it breeds just do it.
Hmm.
And a lot of the new technology and ability to recycle, we can learn from these places that traditionally have been our dumping grounds because guess what? In a lot of the world, you don't just go out and buy a new Stanley Cup, right? You got to use the one you got.
Right.
And when it breaks, you got to figure out what else to use it for because there is no other coffee cup, but there
Right.
isn't this, or there isn't that. And the nearest thing I can liken it to is when I was to our world is really you could just go to the Virgin Islands.
Hmm.
You just don't drive down to the store to get a new mop. It's got to be imported from somewhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not there. There isn't a Home Depot and then a half a block away a Lowe's
Hmm.
because Lowe's has got something slightly different or 50 cents less. That doesn't occur. And so recycling, I think, lends itself to those environments. And we need to look to those environments to figure out how do we do that here instead of keep sending it there because the leakage in that supply chain is where everything is lost, right? I mean, when you start from the American consumer or the European or whatever it is, from this plastic pen, which is a plastic pen, for my hand to getting recycled, the leakage is the issue,
Hmm.
right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I think the fact that kind of the whole globalized economy that we built, in the 90s and early 2000s, it really lended itself to a unsustainable nature of material and material movement. Because, for example, in Nigeria, so they have oil there in Nigeria, which
I've
they
heard. I've heard they
they
do. Yeah.
which is a good and a bad. But they extract the oil. They don't have any refineries in Nigeria, so they extract the oil. They export it to Europe mostly to be refined into gasoline or whatever. Then they have to re-import that as gasoline, petrol, use in their cars or to use it to make a finished good. Those finished goods are also not made in Nigeria; they're made in Europe and China. Then they're imported. So once you have that, plastic bottle or other object, that pen, they're not able to turn it into a new product. They have to again re-export it to a different place and then re-import it to as a new product. So it just created this incredibly unsustainable system. And um, recycling is a big part of how do we change this? How do we change the way this economy works? And that's relocalizing production and recycling. So whether it's in Nigeria, and also the same thing is happening here in the US. When China shut its doors for us sending all of our trash and recyclables to China and to
Yeah.
be re-imported as products, when they shut that gate down in 2018, I think it was,
Yep.
then we had to upscale our recycling industry here in the US to recycle and then remanufacture here in the US. So in that also goes along with the whole, economic and globalization troubles that are happening outside of the recycling world, just the trade barriers and all that. We are relocalizing production in waste, and recycling is a big part of that process.
No, it really is, and we're just still in the development phase of reaction to that shutdown in 2018, 2019, right?
That's right.
We really are. We're so far behind, and that's what I've told people. Because of that convenience of being able to just ship it off, we're behind. We haven't done ourselves any services or the environment any services by exploiting that.
Yeah. And
And
I
that's
think
where I
this,
get into the irresponsible nature of it, right?
yeah, in this interim period, I think before we get our infrastructure back up to snuff here in the U.S.,
Mm,
there is an environmental harm because a lot of the material is just getting thrown away.
yep.
But over the long term, I think it's a good thing because it forces the U.S. and other westernized countries to deal with their
Yeah.
waste locally. Um,
Absolutely, and the resources for advancing new technologies, et cetera, are obviously in the developed world. To take those ideas and really throw some gasoline on them, to so to speak, to really explode them into something that is really if super efficient, can be adopted across. That's the opportunities that I think we see. As long as we can educate ourselves as a society into reacting this way. I mean, even the differences between Europe and the United States are massive, just because of the land resources we have to go hide something in another hole instead of dealing with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I applaud what you're doing there, Joseph. So you have a facility there in Ohio, and where are you at, in Columbus, or are you in back in Dayton?
In Columbus, Ohio. Yeah.
You're back in Columbus. So where is this facility, and how do people interact with it?
So it's on the south side of Columbus, and we primarily source our materials from a combination of working with recyclers who have the material and they're looking for outlets. So
Yeah,
basically, remanufacturers who want to use the recycled material as a raw material input. So we
yeah.
get material from recyclers who have already done the shredding and the washing and the processing of the material, and then we also do some direct collection ourselves,
Okay.
where we partner like with Ohio State University, and for example, last summer we collected all of their flower pots used in their groundskeeping operations.
Oh, okay, cool.
We took those to our facility, we shred them down, and then incorporate them into our product. So we use kind of a combination of those large scale recyclers with direct to businesses to get some of their material.
So you're taking like the PS seedling tray type things. Is that what you're talking
Exactly.
about?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And another kind of interesting material that we recycle is bread tags. So this is kind of I think maybe it's
Yeah.
unique to the US where we use bread tags. It's that little piece of plastic that you tie off a loaf of
Yeah.
bread with. And it's a really small piece of plastic, will never be recycled in the residential stream, even if you put it in there because of the size and the fact that it's polystyrene. So we work with another with a nonprofit. It's a woman in Indianapolis. She collects bread tags from all over the country, and then she gives them to us, which we then incorporate into our product. And it's a really kind of a cool story because it's a unique piece of plastic that people are like, what is, where does that go? What can that can be recycled into? And you can really see the bread tag in our material, which is kind of the coolest part.
That is cool. That is cool. And so who uses your materials
So
that you make?
primarily our materials are used by businesses, and the main applications are restaurants, retail stores, hotels, and it's companies that they have some sort of sustainability initiative as part of their company. They care about sustainability and they want to also show the fact that they're sustainable. So number one, they want to use sustainable materials in their retail display or as tabletops on a restaurant. Um, and our material, yeah, provides that the sustainable aspect, but it also helps their end consumer, their end user, the one who's the patron that's coming into the restaurant or coming into the hotel. They can see the fact that that hotel chain or restaurant is sustainable. And the difference between our material and something like a sustainably sourced wood product is that ours looks recycled. So that person, the end user, can see the fact that they have a commitment to sustainability, where it's
Yeah.
harder to
Yeah.
tell with something like wood.
Yeah. Without putting a plaque on it.
Yeah, exactly. You can read a little
Right.
plaque on there, and like that's cool. But this looks cool. The whole object looks recycled and helps connect that the fact that they're recycling into the minds of that end user.
Fantastic. So where do people are interested in getting this into their business or their offices or their hotels or whatever? I suppose I could put it in my house as well, right? I mean, I could buy and use it in my house. Where are they going to connect with you, Joseph?
Yeah, the best place to connect with us is through our website, marbleplastics.com.
Well, that's
And
easy.
yeah, there's a form in there that you can fill out and tell us a little bit about your project, what the application is, to just make sure that it's a good fit. And yeah, we can chat about it.
Fantastic. Joseph, I appreciate you coming on. I love what you're doing there. And as we've spoken before, hopefully in the very near future, we could do some collaboration in some projects that we're starting off as we spoke about before. And maybe, well, when that happens, we'll have you back on. We'll do a big announcement and we'll kill it. We'll knock it out of the park, brother.
Sounds
All right.
great. It's really nice
Right
to
on,
chat with
brother.
you, Mike.
Hey man, cutters. Peace and love, everybody.
Right.